welcome to another episode of Data Gurus. I'm so excited to have Andrew Moffatt join me today. He is the co-founder and CEO of Qrious Insights. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I remember we did our first episode during COVID. That was a long time ago, and obviously we both have done different things through that timeline. But I'm very excited to hear more about your new venture, which probably is not too new as that. We'll talk about it, but before we get into that, I wanted just to give the listeners a little bit of perspective on how you got to this point today, a little bit of
Okay.
background.
So actually, well, this week was my 25 years in market research.
Mm,
Yeah. I
incredible.
don't know if you'd like to keep counting, but yeah, I started at SSI, which is now Dynata, and spent most of my career there, almost 19 years. And
Amazing.
uh, yeah, I started pre-online before online panels existed. Obviously, SSI were one of the leaders in doing online research and starting that not just in the US but different parts of the world. So had a chance to spend some time in Europe and managed all of the global research agencies in my time, and most of what's relevant today and what we're doing outside of just being impaneled all this time was building and helping figure out measurement panels with Nielsen, who were my client for probably 7 or 8 years. I used to manage the entire global business that we did with Nielsen for all that time, and yeah, learned a lot about what the biggest and best research company in the world and how they operate and how they do things. So
Fantastic.
yeah,
That-
and so yeah, today we do a lot around measurement panels or behavioral panels, and so that's kind of where we learned how to do all that stuff.
And you founded Qrious Insights at what point in time?
Yeah, so we started 3.5 years ago. We didn't call ourselves Qrious Insight till, gosh, like probably 2 years at this point. But it's been the same core team
Yep.
that's been together that 3.5 years, and the first couple of years were really about building and understanding things. So we weren't necessarily selling much to the market. It was really just building apps, building project management systems, building panels, building understanding of behavioral panels and fraud and profiling and all the things that we kind of knew from the outside, but when you start doing them from scratch,
Yeah.
it's very different.
Yeah.
And then I would say about 2 years ago, kind of figured out what we have,
Mhm.
um, and it what it could do and the power of what behavioral could bring to the market. So we changed our branding to Qrious Insight at that point, and yeah, it's still evolving, kind of like what we're bringing to the market and what that looks like today.
Very cool. And I want to get into that. But before we do, I want to ask you from those 8 or 9 years that you focused on managing the Nielsen panels, if you will, measurement panel,
Yeah.
what do you take away as the most critical success factors in terms of being able to shore that up and deliver the data that Nielsen needed?
Yeah. So myself and Mark and Dave
Mhm.
and a few others, obviously, who were my co-founders, we basically built a team all over the world
Mhm.
that used to initially do data collection
Okay.
for, for kind of a few of their divisions, like
Right.
two of their custom research and their bases division. And so that was kind of just regular kind of data collection kind of stuff, just doing it in new countries and needing to build supply
Mhm. Yep.
and build panels and in Latin America and Southeast Asia and China and places that allowed SSI honestly to move into those
Me too.
markets as well.
Yep.
Um, so that was really interesting. And then once we figured out how to do that part and built the team, then we started moving into helping them in other kind of parts of their business, and they were in outsource mode at the time.
Sure.
And so um, we did like A/B testing on measurement panels. We did built recruitment platforms. We built end to end panel management systems. We actually had the first team in China that managed the first home scan panel in China that was working on my team. And through all of that, you learn not just how to build them
Really?
and how to maintain like these types of panels because they're different,
Sure.
uh, but also the power of what they bring. Because essentially, these household panels that Nielsen maintains, like in the U.S., they're just 100,000
Mhm.
people, but they power ratings, they power purchase decisions, brands' understanding of what's happening with their brands, with their products, and we're trusted by every brand,
Mhm.
which is the one thing we took away from everything, which is like what makes these panels so great is that you're leaning into people's actual behaviors, you're leaning into what people are actually doing, and in the world that we live in today, you get to the truth,
Yeah.
and and I find that the world of panels is as much as it's probably evolved away from panels into kind of programmatic
Sure.
sourcing of
Yeah.
respondents, and there's less investment in direct panels than there used to be, and I think the result has been a degradation of that truth
Mhm.
a little bit too much, and that's what's caused some of the yep, industry associations to try to solve this problem
Quality.
and
Yeah.
try to get to data quality. But people don't question behavior. And so when you can get enough behaviors at scale
Right.
to tell you a story, then that's kind of like what we kind of set out to do. Um, and 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 there's two parts to it. So one is like obviously the insights products and
Sure.
the research that you can generate from the data, but the other side is like, how do you create a mechanism that puts the respondent
Mhm.
first at the end of the day? And we're not quite there yet, but we did have this vision of creating like a viral app where people get paid for their data.
Yep.
Um, they get paid for doing nothing basically,
Because you're
and
collecting the data.
because we're paying them for their data,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we're passively collecting that data. Um, I don't think we could afford a viral model because we're paying people for data. Why it's not viral yet.
Yes.
Uh, but the concept of moving it from like uh, a survey panel where uh, you take some information to be able to contact that person again and get their agreement to participate in surveys. Um, it's evolved so much for the participant that they're taking lots of time, lots of questions, filling out profile questionnaires, filling out um, router questionnaires or pre-screeners before people go into surveys, all as a function of trying to get to the truth or get to like that these are real people. And it's counterintuitive to how the world is actually moving, right?
Right.
So the world's moving away from asking questions. It's requiring you to get people's attention faster, take less time from people than more time.
Yeah.
And so this type of a model where you're learning without asking is, and that learning we've been able to extend out into some key areas for research. So one is we can learn what fraud looks like beyond traditional fraud, right? So we see behavior-based fraud, where you see someone's digital footprint. You see if a phone is plugged into a wall 100% of the time. You
Know
know
there's something going on.
there's something going on. That you see carriers or you know different types of device characteristics that are always indicative of fraud, and so that's one element that ensures more from a research point of view that this person's real.
Sure.
Um, But the second is that, we're able to profile people based on their behaviors.
Mhm.
So instead of asking you, are you an Instagram user or a heavy Instagram user? Or did you buy Tide? Or did you go to a certain location? Um, this is all, again, for efficiency purposes and for understanding people for analysis. So instead of asking those questions, we're actually able to derive everything from just passively tracking them within their devices. So we know if you're an auto intender, what convenience stores you go to, what QSR brands you're shopping, what your social media habits are. You can create media
Yep.
plans from your survey respondents, and we're trying to find ways to make behavioral super easy to use by everyone, rather than just the bigger companies who can actually invest in building these panels and then using them primarily for measurement purposes in a lot of countries.
So you set out when you started the company, you had a vision of saying, listen, you see the traditional survey panels are dealing with fraud, you have programmatic buying. And was it instinctive to say, you know what, I'm gonna go out and do this differently. I'm gonna go out and start with behavioral data. This.
A little bit in between where I am
Yeah.
now and SSI. I spent most of my time in building fraud tools
Mm,
and building B2B validation
right.
tools and building tools to be able to pre-screen people so they have like some subject matter knowledge and what we're going to ask them to take part in. But what I found is in doing all of that, that you're never solving the full problem.
Right.
You're actually just solving maybe 10% of the problem or maybe 50% of the fraud problem, but you still weren't able to ensure this person was real. You weren't able to ensure the data that you collected on that person was valid
Mhm,
in a way that people would trust.
mhm.
And so it felt like to do this right, like the promise of research has always been, especially in tracking people, it's been that you can just observe people and then kind of like reach in
Yeah.
and kind of ask them questions when you need to. And I think that world is now possible.
Mhm.
Just you have to create it differently. And and in the world that we're creating, it's not just thinking about research and how it could be done better. It's also thinking about the
Yeah.
respondent
Yeah.
and their role in that ecosystem and how we can make it better for them. And I think that's the key part
Yeah.
is um it getting enough and in this way, our tagline is actually like ask more, no less.
Right.
I mean ask less,
No
no
more.
more.
Yeah.
So in that sense, like you can ask less questions, you can know way more about somebody because we can behaviorally tell you think of a simple survey at a respondent level, like what that person is doing within that device within any time frames. If you want to know how many times this person went on Facebook for how many hours, how many days within the month. We can append all of that without asking those in surveys and kind of take the burden off of asking questions all the time, which is kind of the key thing,
And I think even with the fact that you know where people travel, like let's say even a subway or a train or whatever, you can also inform ad placement for out of home advertising. So it's not always just digital. It could be also physical
Correct.
ad placement and understanding as well.
Yeah, correct. We see a lot of that kind of intersection between
Mhm.
in mobile with like digital buying and then picking up in person, or like think of QSR with like your mobile ordering and then like showing up or using a DoorDash or Uber Eats and things like that. So that intersection of kind of where you show up in that real life and how it pertains to your digital journey
Out
is
there
becoming
digitally. Yeah.
like really
Yeah.
important, because a lot of brands are actually pushing their own interactions onto mobile so they can kind of track people better as well. So yeah, that's definitely something we see, and we're not doing a lot of out of home because we're just building up that location based footprint that we have right now. But that application is definitely there, and I've seen other behavioral panels kind of operate in that way.
What are some of the challenges that I mean, yeah, what are some of the challenges you've had with behavioral data? Because I think about like we all throw off so much data in a day.
Yep. Yeah.
Imagine the amount of data that you collect and store, and then on top of it, process in a meaningful timeline is significant. And so, how do you deal with that?
So the two biggest challenges we had were scale.
Yep.
So getting enough people to actually track
Yep.
uh, And so we solved that through some partnerships, through building out our own panels, and we now track 100,000 people every day, which is bigger than any of
Yeah,
the Nielsen panels
that's
that kind of
fantastic.
exist. So, and then we're looking to see how we can scale that globally. But the main thing has been about how to get access into the behavioral data in a really easy, usable way.
Yeah.
Like you said, um, every action on your device is a lot,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of data, and every action is a line of code or like a line
Sure.
of data, right? And so with 100,000 people, you actually generate about 1 billion different events every month.
Wow.
Um, and that can be anything just from just regular app usage or web usage or searches, but we're also starting to build out more and more in-app data.
Mm.
So like all the in-app ads someone sees in social media, all the shopping they're doing in-app on an Amazon, Walmart, and Target, what
Right.
everything they watch on a YouTube or Netflix, we see actual content down to minutes and seconds that they're watching any piece of content. And so it's been making that usable fast
Yeah.
has been the biggest challenge. And so we have so what we created actually from a research point of view, a research set of products is more of a behavioral enrichment that can be used to enhance any kind of research that you're doing. And so think of it like this. If you're running a basic survey, that we can append uh, individual behavioral characteristics at a respondent level on every person so that a researcher can bring the survey data and the behavioral data together into the analysis that they're used to
Yep.
using. So, like, be able to bring it into SPSS or Excel and run their crosstabs and do their analysis like they normally would. Um, but we can do things like take concept acceptors and show you exactly where they spend all their time on media, what they're doing on their phones, where they're buying products, or we can create custom variables, that look at a category, look at a brand, show you like this person shopped this brand,
Yep.
bought this product, saw this ad. Um, we can actually append that at a respondent level for any survey that we do. So some really interesting applications. So take that concept
Sure.
acceptors, you're able to take your acceptors and create a media plan from the actual behavioral data, not necessarily from anything you collected within the survey.
Right.
Because you can say these people spend 90% of their time on TikTok and 20% of their time on Instagram and know exactly where you can reach those people. Segmentations, able to like cut out half your questions, replace them with actual behavioral data, create, your own segments. And we're now looking into how we can actually activate those audiences in different ways as well once you create segmentation. Um, but for any survey whatsoever, like the whole key is being able to target
Yep.
people based on any behavior and then append any behavioral information to any survey so that you don't have to ask those questions um or can target much more efficiently than you could
Yep.
just from asking people, how many times they used Instagram last week
Right.
or whatever the target is.
Yeah, and that's hard to recall too. Um,
Yeah. And it's very inaccurate when they do.
yeah. Let me
Yeah.
ask you this. So, as you mentioned, there's industry associations that really are trying to focus on fraud. And, to your point, like a lot of companies focus on what I call the top of the funnel. So making sure you're actually not a bot, you're not, you're not you you are a person basically.
Or you're a higher likelihood of being a
Or a higher
person.
likelihood of being posted. But then the thought thereafter, there's also the other piece of it, which is, treating that respondent with care and quality so that they stay and they respond to surveys. Have you
Right.
seen different metrics in your panel in terms of
Oh gosh, yeah.
retention and engagement? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So retention is super high. So we look at things like how long we can keep
Yeah,
someone
which is
as
critical to your model,
the
business
main
model.
variable
Yeah,
that yeah, for our business model. And because the longer you can track someone
yeah,
longitudinally, that provides you with a lot more information about journeys
yes,
and other products that we have. And um, so retention is super high. I think after once we get people past seven
mm,
days, we pretty much have like 99% plus retention every week from that point on.
nice.
And then it gets higher the
Yeah,
longer you go on, basically, because people are getting paid for doing nothing. And once they get over the fact that that's
yep,
happening and their data is passively being collected, then people like the experience. From a survey response rate point of view, within our panels, we're seeing routinely like 30 to 60%,
wow,
basically,
yep,
which is infinitely higher than regular
fantastic.
panels.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic.
but it allows us to do more things, right? So when we can see, you know, I don't know, 500 people that were exposed to an ad from a certain brand, we're able to get like, a couple of hundred people to actually take a survey
Right.
from those 100 people rather than a regular panel where you'd be lucky to get under, 5 to 10
Sure.
people to actually take part. So it opens up this avenue to be able to do a lot more in-depth research, couple survey and behavioral together a lot better. And honestly, just from a human understanding, like you can never ask someone enough questions to understand them, in my point of view.
Yeah,
Um, and the way we can basically dynamically update your profile information every day based on the newest and greatest
sure.
information you're
Yeah,
searching for or apps that you're using.
yeah,
That dynamic profiling is something that we're testing and want to like give that the ability for other panels
mhm,
to be able to do the
mhm,
same thing, to be able to identify fraud within their universe, to be able to hyper target and use their people a lot more efficiently and ask people a lot less questions because we feel like that's where the world is
yeah.
going.
And in 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 the solutions that you provide, obviously you have historical behavioral data that you're appending. You
Yep.
you might ask, a set of critical questions. And in the world of sample and data collection, there's these kind of constructs of incidents and CPI and, you know, ha- that has probably is a different way to express that in your business.
Yeah, we still have to say conform to some of like how people buy
Right.
generally.
Yeah.
How we get to the same outcome is probably a little bit different. Um, we see certain audience having certain value, right? And maybe that's how we look at certain things. But generally, we're able to target most
Yeah.
things that come our way. Like it's funny because you don't think of it when you kind of run these things, but like someone came in looking for horse owners one day, and we're able to go and find people that actually went and bought like horse products online and stuff like that. And so you don't necessarily need incidents
Right.
because you haven't profiled that question, right? So you don't know if you got them. You kind of already have them. It's just finding them and finding how many of them you can get. And because you have historical data, it's a very good predictor of what's always going to be there as well. So we can go back like 3, 6, 9 months, 12 months, see like how that looks, how it looks month over month, how it looks every day, and can target much more efficiently for anything like that. Yeah, it's kind of neat.
Just
I think yeah.
go ahead.
I was just saying the other thing that we can do outside of just making research ready is we do work directly with brands and create like really fast, easy to consume visualizations of that data. So you want to understand kind of ads, you want to understand shopping journeys, you want to understand your competitors and their interactions from an ad or brand perspective. We can visualize out this data, I would say in hours, where it takes big research firms weeks, months, honestly, to create kind of outputs from behavioral data because of its complexity. So they've opened up kind of new ways to be able to explore doing research as well. And what's interesting that I've found is like we've got the brands that serve multiple categories, and now you kind of look at like one audience being able to look at every category rather than looking at research, say in discrete siloed events,
Yeah.
right? So kind of see this evolving to the point where maybe even a brand wants to create behavioral data to understand their own user base. We can onboard that people or create some kind of view of an audience that allows them to track everything simultaneously just from behaviors and then kind of intersect qual or quant
Mm,
when when you see kind of the behaviors that are interesting to you, to
very
be able
cool.
to research.
What's and you might, I don't know if you might not know the answer, but any surprising insight from behavioral data that you've seen? Like, wow, I would have never predicted that, or anything that you've gleaned from looking at all of this data to say this was truly a surprise to me.
In the data itself, from
Yeah,
an insight
yeah, yeah,
perspective,
yeah.
um, we've seen different things along the way. I think when ChatGPT first came out, like, we saw really interesting things.
I don't know.
Now we see, like, ChatGPT being used by, like, 90% of people in our panel, which is crazy to
Great.
begin with.
I know.
But, like, people using it to, like we saw people using it to apply for jobs everywhere
Wow.
and, like, do kind of, like, really interesting things like that. And yeah,
That's it.
and they became topics of things that we wanted to do some research on. But our main research that we've conducted, and you touched on it earlier, was on recall. Like, honestly, people are terrible at remembering what they did. Like, we gave people like a 4-hour range. How much time did you spend on your phone last week? Only 20% of people got it right.
That's interesting.
And then when you get into like product search, how many products did you search on Amazon last week? 4% of people got it right in a range, a big range, like, and
Okay.
so, like, you wonder, like, how good the data you're collecting is and how much you rely on it to make decisions, and can it be better? And, like, that's where I get excited because I know what we're collecting is always deterministic, it's always the truth.
Right.
You can balance the universe of 100,000 people to look demographically like everything else, and you can answer most business questions from, all of a super large set of data from a lot of people, but it's still one set of people,
Right.
right? And that doesn't change every day, and the data is always being collected. And the thing about research is most research is done in the future,
Right.
not in the
Yeah.
past, right? This gives you the ability to look back and see trends and see how things happened and see how things moved differently than what you could otherwise. So, yeah,
Very
interesting.
exciting. Yeah. And tell me from the perspective of understanding, the consumer understanding the relationship. I get incentives for giving up my data, or not giving up, but providing access to my data. Do you think
Yeah.
that consumers fully understand that? They I- are
We're trying to
yeah,
be, like, as open as we're
right.
very open.
Okay.
We're collecting your data, we're
Right.
using your data for this purpose. You'll get paid for every day that you share data. If you don't, you don't get paid, and so you have that kind of interaction of data for compensation every day, and then that allows you to actually get through privacy issues, because you're getting user consent. It also allows you to get into all these wall gardens that are hard to see into, right? So your Amazons and Walmarts and Facebooks and Instagrams
Yeah.
and TikToks, because we're actually taking information from what's on the user's screen, not necessarily from within the app, right? And so because the panelist owns the screen, they own the device, you're paying them for access to that data. You're able to get into any wall gardens, and I will say the only indicator that people might know what's going on is that you see conversion rates or acceptance rates be different across different demographics or generations. So younger generations much more apt to do something like this than older
Yeah.
generations.
Which
But
makes sense.
it, but that's to be expected, and actually they're the hardest people to get to participate in anything. So if something can help those
Yeah.
at that audience participate better, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's so true. I actually don't think, like, in this day and age also, to your point, audiences react differently, but I think the younger generation have accepted, like, they're like everything is exposed, and I think they've accepted it because they share their entire lives, not everyone, but a lot of their lives on social media. And so if you have some
Yeah.
other data and I get compensated, that kind of acceptance is not a big deal. I'm making generalizations, whereas other people didn't grow up that way. Of course.
Exactly, and I think if you did grow up that way, you're more apt to say yes, and you know your data's being everyone knows their
Yeah,
data's being used. It's like people joke about, I said something and then Instagram was like, "Show me an ad for
but
it," like 2 seconds
yeah,
later, you know? So, like, it's more like we actually pay people more for their data, like, every year than, say, Facebook
right.
makes per user, on their data, and it's really more about for me, like, people just wanna make some easy money.
Yeah.
Um, you don't have to do anything to make the money. That's the beauty of it, and then when we actually do engage with them, like, the response rates are the major indicator of engagement, right, to surveys, and if we can get 30 to 60% of folks to reply when we're trying to reach out to them, and we're giving them a decent incentive,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Not like a regular research
yeah,
incentive, but, like, it's I think it's 10 cents a minute is where we're at right now. So, like, 5-minute survey, you're getting 50 cents
yeah.
or
And it's
10
not that
minutes
long of a
survey.
survey.
Not long of a survey, and it's nice addition to what you're already getting, um, and it's working. You know, it's not a complicated model per se. The data and turning that data into something usable is really complicated.
Mhm.
And that's honestly the thing that we've struggled with the most and built the most and actually want to bring to the market over the next kind of 12 months as we take our learnings and try to apply them to other people's panels and things like that.
So you provided your SDK to other panel providers to be able to
Yeah.
they can leverage the same application, that you have for their panel. Do you collect the data from the panel and also report on it as well?
Yeah. So we're working on this right now where we can deploy our technology into or create from our white label app
Yeah.
like a branded version for anyone.
Okay.
And the first version that we're trying to solve for people is number 1, we'll tell you who your fraudulent
Yeah.
folks are within your user base and tell you how we think they're fraudulent,
Okay.
um, and beyond what you've already done just from their behaviors. The second is to create this profiling slash targeting capability so that you can target based on any of the behavioral data that you can collect on your panel rather than you having to figure out the data because it's really difficult
Mhm.
to do that. So we're trying to think of it like a front end, kind of like a
Got it.
feasibility tool or almost like the front end of a DIY tool that that would allow you to maximize like the benefits of having this on your panel. And then the second part will be kind of behavioral products or things that you can create from there, separate from just sampling and things like that. But, so that's in, yeah, we're trialing that out with, I think, about 5 panels over the next, I will say 6 to 12 months,
Okay.
to get it right,
Yeah.
and then probably bring it out more broadly early next year. Yeah.
It sounds like a good strategy, benefits across both sides of the partnership.
Yeah, and because in the end, what you're creating is, an environment that's better for the respondents, right? And a more sustainable one, and I think at the end, that's what this industry needs,
Yeah.
the sustainable group of people that are willing to participate in research. What they look like, whether they're behavioral driven, whether they're just straight survey takers or other things that, you know, people can debate the merits of each different approach, but for us, it's really about getting real people and then and taking the data that we already know about people, which is we've already known a lot about people for years in the industry, but no one trusted that data to be appended to that person, right? So if supplier A or panel A gave you this set of data on a person, you're gonna re-ask it again because you wanna make sure that it's real. Whereas, you can't question behaviors. If I tell you that Sima went and used Instagram 3 times in the past month for 20 minutes, like that's what she did on that phone, and you can't question that. And so moving people into that environment where they're leveraging data beyond the survey is kind of where we're at right now, especially with our clients that are leveraging the behavioral data, because when you do that, you can actually change your research instruments. You can change the questions you're asking to respondents. You can use the behavioral data to drive quotas sometimes within your surveys. Um, and you're just changing the type of analysis that you can do. We also see it kind of bridging insights and marketing functions a little bit more, because you've got a data set that can actually serve both real time and which kind of doesn't happen today.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's what I like also in terms of your solutions. It's not, you have research solutions, you have solutions for brands or managing brands, and then in terms of advertising.
I
Yeah. And
yeah,
so, I mean, that's powerful in terms of being able to leverage this huge data set and being able to create solutions for those specific use cases in terms of,
yeah.
and that,
That was the hardest thing
yeah,
to begin with, honestly, because you can do anything.
right.
And so, like, how do you decide like what you can do,
Or,
what's the right products to bring to the table, and then so the research stuff came about by figuring out what can we give them that can bring behavioral data into their analysis, right? Because they want to control what the client sees and the insights that are being derived from that surveys. And so that made sense. And I would say that product's probably only about 6 months old.
okay,
um, And people love it because you're able to shorten surveys, like no more, ask less questions. That's where it all came from,
right.
because what we're doing that all the time. But also, like, the knowing more part's really important, right? So, like, if you can do a media plan just from running a survey, just from appending some data to the end of it, like that's hugely valuable for very little cost and very little effort, and allows you to bridge some gaps that weren't there before.
Yep. So
Um,
I would be remiss not to ask you in this world of AI, um,
yes,
I mean, obviously you have good data for training models.
we do.
How does that fit into your thesis in terms of as you drive business forward?
Yeah. Uh, so AI is it's changing everything, and it will in the future. I would say I see AI in our world in so many different ways. It's like hard to comprehend. The first I see is maybe how we even share insights and share data. Because if you have a data set like we have, you can actually start asking it questions in a more traditional way than you can in, say, through survey forum or through visualization, even at some point. And so I think how people get access to insights will change a lot, and be more of an interface, maybe like a GPT type interface where you can just ask that data set something. When it comes to synthetic data, synthetic panels, like I think this is the perfect training set for any of that kind of those kind of models. Because to me, synthetic is as good as the input.
Yeah.
And what I learned back in my early survey sampling days when I got trained on telephone sampling, like everything's about the foundation of,
Or,
like, the core of who's taking your surveys to begin with. Are they representative? Are they the right type of people? And if you can bridge that gap, that's like just huge. So having deterministic data at scale, hugely powerful for synthetic data. We're also more relevant looking at it from an activation point of view. So creating like behavioral seed audiences for advertising is actually what we're exploring at the moment, to be able to take our advertising products beyond, say, measurement and planning, but include activation and even help people sell ads based on how we show audiences showing up in the world. Um, and then you know, and then all the other AI,
well,
it's like
what I love,
like AI qual, like real time
artists,
qual, like behavior is happening, and actually then engaging with an AI moderated like, I see that as being huge for quality scale and then being able to tie that together with behaviors and things like that. So, yeah.
I love the, the positivity around AI and the endless options in terms of what you can do, which, I think as an industry, it's important for us to embrace it because it's here, right? And so how do we
Yeah.
build our businesses to be able to do something faster, more quality driven and unique? And so I I'm happy to hear like the positivity around it, which is fantastic.
Yeah. It just has so much power,
Yeah,
and just like how you use anything,
sure.
right? And I think early days, people are gonna operationally
Yeah,
work faster, right? That's gonna be the simple, easy things. But if you to me, what I love what we're doing and the data set that we have is because it's kind of founded on the truth
yeah.
and deterministic data. And so I think the more we can build that up, extend it out, maybe connect account level data. So like pull in your historical purchase transactions, collect, maybe enhance it with CTV data or purchase data of different kinds, then that data set just becomes richer and richer and
Being in it.
can actually change how you kind of like do
Yeah,
research in a lot of ways, right? Because all the measurement panels that really exist, the behavioral panels that exist, as I mentioned earlier, they're really just used in measurement or training purposes. There's not really too many commercial applications for it that someone outside of the big companies can afford
right.
to build or do. And so, you know, as we try to do this, the whole idea about trying to get, say, our technology in other panels or other places is that like we can build this in different countries and create a universe of people allow you to do research and compete with like a big Nielsen type organization where I think if you had something like our data, you could even create like a research company in a
Right.
box so that you could have someone start from scratch that's really good at insights and go to a brand with a set of data that doesn't have the overheads that a research company has today, right? So that who knows what it's going to look like in a few years, but
It could
but
be a
the
marketplace of data,
it could be,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
There's lots of those
Lots
trying
of
to
cool
pop up right
things.
now.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's
Thank
fascinating
you.
stuff that you guys are doing, and I look forward to keeping in touch to learn more.
Thanks for having me. Great to talk as always.
Same. Thank you.